Okay, so in this video, I'm not sure how long I want this to be. I do want it to be candid and authentic. It is convenient for me to just make longer videos and just share them as needed. This one will be the interview prep process for software engineers. So I have a Excalibur new board for interview prep. My face is on the left for this video. To kind of show some of the boards that I have in place. For example, I've been interviewing for about a year now. Unfortunately, was not able to get an offer, but have been able to consistently make it to final rounds, and I'm currently awaiting an offer at the time of recording. I don't know how much of a deep dive. I think for this, I'll just introduce the interview process at a high level. I think it's helpful to know and point out some of the resources that have helped me get to the point where I'm consistently passing. Let's start with this. So the interview process, right? So it's you have a resume, and then other heuristics like LinkedIn, and then you start thinking about, okay, well, how do we tailor our resume? What jobs should we be applying to? And so you start asking yourself some of these other questions. Let me make this a little bigger. And generally you ask these questions to both. What key skills do I have? And what is the market looking for, right? So unfortunately, this is now when we have to start thinking about the business question. As an employee, what skill sets and value can I provide to solve business problem? Okay, so this is really why we're getting paid. And if you're going to keep up with the W-2 employee route like I am, for various reasons, then this is the question we're trying to solve here. Yeah, so another mental model that I recently came up with that I need to integrate as part of my portfolio is, we're trying to navigate this intersection of the employer. You could be self-employed and whatnot, but an employee. And there's like another interesting one similar to this where it's like, what was it? Supply and demand. And then other concepts like market value, solving problems people would pay for, right? Things like could be a product, could be a service, something like that. Just something that someone would pay for, right? Not limited to hourly or per job or per service, right? So that's a little different with like dollar cost averaging and like what your time is worth, basically. Okay, but ultimately you're trying to address the supply and demand problem, and your skill sets and value that you can provide because someone's willing to pay you set amount. Effectively your employer. Okay. So ideally you want to be somewhere in the middle, right? This is where we start talking about like your growth between the skills, transferable, maybe or maybe not. I know for me personally, there's not just the monetary aspect of things. You do want to think about compatibility, communication, and managerial culture, all these other considerations, quality of life, mainly for me. And then, at some point, like if that starts divulging and you're no longer fit with your employer or said market value, then, you're going to have to find a new role. Ideally, you have a minimum threshold of what your boundaries are with what you can know what you're looking for and what you're not looking for. And then sometimes, like, if you just need a job and you just kind of have to bite the bullet and suck it up for a little bit, unfortunately, until you find something better. Okay. So this is actually the first thing I would think about. This will be a longer rant. I'm gonna be more structured about this later. Very much 0 to 1, just getting my thoughts out there, and then I will figure it out later. So these are some of the questions we think about. Actually, these are the same thought processes I've also been thinking about. Not to talk about my background, but there's so much with, let's say, the software. We'll include data engineering job market. You could be, let's say, all right, so let's start answering some of these questions, because this will actually lead into my mental model for a sweet compass. Okay. So let's see. We'll do this. We'll start thinking about so for me, I started out full stack software engineer. All right. With applied to biotechnology, basically. All right. So full stack. Of course, you have your design. Like your system design. Problems, design your non-functional, functional, etc. Apply to the business. Your data, right? So once you design your data, or design your system, you kind of know what data storage you'll need, data types that you're handling, your data pipelines. You kind of see your model, your machine learning model that you might use, might develop. Maybe I'll zoom in. Maybe now with AI as a language model, we start thinking about some of the agentic stuff and generative AI things that we can do. Otherwise, we start taking a step back and remembering there are other neural networks and deep learning models that we can consider as well. And there are multimodal alternatives, I guess we'll say, and higher order things beyond classical machine learning. Okay, so that's some considerations. And then, of course, that's all local things. Let's think about in the cloud. So now we start thinking cloud stuff. We start thinking about our servers that we deploy as our backend. And then larger distributed systems. And then, we want to visualize these things so we have a front end. And then ultimately, once things are deployed in production for models, let's say, from offline to online serving now, I just call this operations or ops, because you can get pretty niche about like the differences between DevOps and deterministic scripts and how that differs from the training data that you need to manage with machine learning ops. But then nowadays we have large language models, and generative AI is different than a machine learning model that's classically trained. So now we have LLM ops, but not all language models are. Well, let me say, not all neural networks are limited to natural language processing and transformers for the language model. So AIOps is kind of like a catch-all for some of the machine learning and LLM ops things. Okay, so it's pretty specific. The main takeaway here is like you're just monitoring, observing things, and deploying things to the cloud. Whether that's your own internal, I think this is important. I'll write this down actually. Internal servers, on-prem maybe. This could be native servers, and by that I mean like AWS, GCP, Azure. Those are the big three that I think of, and then you have like third party. Built on top of native cloud. Or, could be some other alternative. That's just how I'm going to communicate that stuff. Okay, so this is how I've been navigating these kinds of questions, and like which area of roles that would emphasize one more than the other, while following, this Venn diagram a little bit on, even though it's a role and position that I would be interested in because of the technical skills, you know, for better or worse, with the manager and leadership there and other soft skills and quality of life. I should write this down. Quality of life, culture, fit, skills, tech. Yeah. You know, there are like other considerations that we want to be mindful of too. Okay, of course the money. Let me not exclude that. Right. So, personally speaking, I just need monetary value that's competitive, keeps me in the market. I do have a soft number. There is a soft cap. Years of experience is a metric that's used. So I'm a normal person. I'm not one of these like 1%ers. So very much give me a competitive wage, live below my means, learn to be happy. That's where I'm coming from. Very humble, hopefully. Until then, I'm just hoping to share my knowledge here and help people out. So this is how I've been navigating these things. You know, system design is more as you become more senior and more vertical. So that's kind of an agnostic skill. But I'd say like the system that you design and like the skills that you need to know, that's where it starts to be pretty specific. For example, if you wanted to be more on the data side, then you start want to be consider like data engineering, and you start understanding the differences between the little nuances with data analytics versus data science. And then, oh, let me zoom in, sorry. I mean, I could tell you these in the video, but the video will be really long. So I'll keep it at a high level, because even I'm like trying to visually understand. Then what's the difference between data science versus data machine learning engineering, right? Because this is actually a bit of a overlap with like if you see online, there's a lot of these spiderweb skills and distributions of effectively what this is. Maybe we could find one, or I can make it on the spot, but I'd prefer not doing that on the spot. But generally speaking, the software engineering terminology actually has parallels to the data realm. So let me do this a little bit. Let me see. So one of the things that I noticed with the front end, so let's say in software engineering, let's say web dev, right? So in web dev, we have system design for users of an application. I'm going to skip the data part a little bit, because it's mainly, I want to talk about the backend, like what defines a backend. That's still your server logic, but the distinguishing factor, in my opinion, is the front end, where the visualization is generally a TypeScript. It can be TypeScript. It could also be Python. But your deployment is on the web. So browser-based things, okay? So this is where, in my experience, now in enterprise and let's say data engineering, analytics. Well, let me start with science, actually. Yeah, that's fine. Okay. System design for data intensive applications. That's hinting at the book. Backend's a little bit different. Backend is more closely related to the databases. Front end is actually typically BI tools, so business intelligence. Oftentimes, I find that these are low code, meaning, okay, hold on. Let me just finish this. And then deployment is on. It's also on a server, but it's not like a web. It's more like it's on a server with an API endpoint or visualized on a platform. Okay. Let me move this. All right. So what I meant by the BI tools is because, the focus is on data, whether that's data pipelines for data engineering, data analytics is generally the past data analyzed to analyze the present, whereas data science is generally discovery of, we'll say, novel data or models in order to predict the future. So that's generally how I view those. But finishing this thought for a moment. Some of the enterprise standard business intelligence tools that are low code, like our Tableau, Google's Looker, and then Microsoft's Power BI. And then this is really how I've noticed things track. And, if you wanted to do things from scratch, then, yeah, like use Python, Matplotlib, Seaborn, rather than having a low-code business intelligence tool. That's something I'm currently doing, and I just wanted to share that because that tracks more, in my opinion, to being a software engineer than some of these data-specific roles. But visualizing, what software engineering is, I've read a fair amount of books on this now, being self-taught software. And then I've just found that, like, it's a really big umbrella term because this AI is a part of it, and then even in AI, actually, hold on. I've seen people even consider like data science like a subdomain of software engineering, but a cross domain of AI, and then AI as a catch-all for machine learning, and then it keeps building on to like deep learning, and then there's another one for reinforcement learning, and then generative AI. But yeah, so for now, we'll just remove this. We'll call this data science. I'll put this at the bottom, because the bottom I want to put data engineering. And there are these other titles like machine learning engineer, AI engineer, site reliability engineer. Okay, so like at some point you start questioning, like, okay, then what even is engineering? what is engineering then? Okay, because if you notice, like data analytics, data science, it doesn't have, like, what is that an engineer? I don't know. Is that an engineering job? Because the title clearly says it's not. So my definition of this is applied science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Maybe just put science. I don't know. Data science is also. Well, I guess this is also a skill. I think, in my experience, it's been more about scalability and like the whole things with reliability and all that good stuff. Whereas with science, especially with when I was trying to understand like the differences between a machine learning engineer versus scientist. What is discovery of novel I guess we can do here. Let me just keep up with the applied and math. Okay, I'm including statistics and math, by the way. For discovery. I think that's fair. I think this has been my experience. Yeah. Yeah, this makes sense to me. So this is where like the R&D stuff comes in. And oftentimes in my experience, having done drug discovery and drug development, yeah. This is when things generally progress from research. We actually do this in software already. Proof of concept. Minimum viable product. You know, in the wet lab when I was doing this, it's like bench scale, pilot, manufacturing, large scale. We do this in software, it's the same thing. So yeah, research 0 to 1, proof of concept, minimal viable product, you know, then scaling. So there's more of an emphasis for the engineering part to come here. Okay. So long rant. Hopefully people were following along, but this is all to say, like, I'd say it's never too late to change your career. And I think it is important to be able to identify what you are looking for. You know, really assess like what your criteria is for an employer, and like what you're looking for. You know, if you are laid off, unfortunately, then maybe you kind of have to consider the first thing that comes. But you know, if it doesn't work out and you don't see yourself there for long term, then these are some of the considerations that you have to think about. And then, you know, maybe you do find a good company that you can see yourself working with, but maybe some of the other considerations like the monetary part. Because oftentimes you'll grow faster in your role than they are able to compensate you for. So that's why being able to be happy with a number that you can live below your means with and have other considerations as a criteria for an employer is helpful before considering finding new employment. So that response is tailored towards more people that are in the interviewing process that have a job, but it's also applicable and transferable to people that unfortunately got laid off or are looking for new roles. Maybe their employer was toxic and they had to quit. So, yeah. So this, I could probably end this video now. I think this is fine for introducing kind of where I'm wanting to lead with like this quasi short series I want to make, and really identifying like what is your next step. Like you could just find the same role that you were doing previously, but what if you didn't want to do that, right? So that's kind of where I'm going with this. And even for myself, like there are areas of my career that I find that I would like to be doing certain things at the professional level, especially for, let's go back to the Venn diagram for a moment. Especially for some of the other considerations from the employer side, which is the scale of the company. And some of the skills that are marketable that I think would help my overall personal growth can align with larger companies since they have certain business use cases that smaller companies don't, and vice versa. And that's kind of where you start thinking about the size of company that you're going to be thinking about. Yeah, so I have some notes on this. I think I'll end on this video with sharing this. I think it's important to note that with this said, this is kind of hinting at the behavioral part. I will first shout out that this is my notes and takeaways from Bite Go's new book that came out. The behavioral interview part from Steven. Yeah. Previously worked at Amazon. Like, yeah, he has a whole YouTube video. Great resource for the behavioral aspect of things. So that's kind of what I'm hinting at. Or maybe you're a new grad and, you know, you're on the track to graduate and, you know, things don't work out. You know, ideally you kind of figure out that employer-employee Venn diagram and fit. But, you know, that's not always the case. So these are some of the notes that I have on my portfolio based on that book. Highly recommended. What I'm hinting at really is, you know, by level, what career stage you're at and where you're looking to grow into. Maybe you're on the cusp like I am with mid to senior. So I don't want to sandbag. Like, I'd rather just make the jump down than by the time I get there than by years of experience, sure. And then by company type. So whether you're going to look into startups, smaller companies, large tech companies, or mid-sized companies, and then which domain. Right? So there's some other considerations there. So there's a lot of homework that someone would have to think about. It took me a while to figure out as well, like what I'm interested in, what I'm looking for, like would I do this as a job? And that's really the key thing, because there are some things in the joy of programming and engineering that I wouldn't want to do as a job, because it would take the fun away from it for me. So those are some other considerations. I'll end the video here. I think this is a good intro to the interviewing process, things that, you know, it's not just your resume and your LinkedIn. Because we really want to think about, like, what skills are we trying to market in ourselves with. So let me end on this, because this is also the other consideration, is do we get a portfolio or not? I would highly recommend it. Let me zoom in. Because there was a time I got asked to do an hour presentation. And I was like, that's a little ridiculous. So I'm glad I had a portfolio so that I had enough content to be able to do that. But while highly recommended, not mandatory. It's helpful. It has helped me. So the portfolio, in any regards, continuing this for a moment. You know, if we're trying to answer what skill sets we can provide to solve the employer's business problem, then we need to be able to demonstrate and signal these things. So that's the catch-22 between, like, your resume, your LinkedIn, your portfolio. Because the thing is that some employers do qualify internships. Some employers don't qualify academia. Isn't that weird? Some employers only don't qualify. Qualify. Oops. Qualify professional experience. So yeah, isn't that the weird catch-22? Where you're like, how do you demonstrate professional experience, right? So it's a little weird. So the portfolio part is also a second catch-22, because if you only have professional experience and you signed an NDA or you have intellectual property, then what do you do? Okay, so that's why you have a portfolio. It's so that you're effectively demonstrating marketable skills applied to enterprise. You know, whether that's applied to enterprise in the future, to your potential employer, that has transferable tech stack and skills, or you've done this in the past. Okay, that's a good part to end. So I'll probably clean this up. I'll probably start thinking about like a short video series, because doing this prep is so that I never have to do this prep again. Yeah, so I'm hoping by doing this, it's like a free short prep course series for people out there. I can point to resources and probably start marketing this myself for free. I don't want to sell this course. I think that's a little ridiculous. I don't think something like this should be behind a paywall. So I'll take the time to make something like this. Hopefully it helps people, because I know it helped me. So